Hello everyone, got a bunch of lawyer jokes for you today. So an investment counselor decided to go out on her own. She was shrewd and diligent, so business kept coming in, and pretty soon she realized that she needed an in-house counsel. Excited at her runaway success, she began to interview young lawyers. As I'm sure you can understand, she started off with one of the first applicants. In a business like this, our personal integrity must be beyond question. She leaned forward. "Mr. Peterson, are you an honest lawyer?" "Honest," replied the job prospect. "Let me tell you something about honesty. Why, I'm so honest that my father lent me $15,000 for my education, and I paid back every penny the minute I tried my very first case." Bowled over by the apparent honor of the applicant, she exclaimed, "Impressive. And what sort of case was that?" The lawyer squirmed in his seat and admitted, "He sued me for the money." One morning a blind bunny was hopping down the bunny trail, and he tripped over a large snake and fell right on his twitchy little nose. "Oh, please excuse me," said the ever-so-polite bunny. "I didn't mean to trip over you, but I'm blind and couldn't see." "That's perfectly all right," replied the snake. "To be sure, it was my fault. I didn't mean to trip you, but I'm blind too, and I didn't see you coming. By the way, what kind of animal are you?" "Well, I really don't know," said the bunny. "I'm blind, and I've never seen myself. Maybe you could examine me and find out." So the snake felt the bunny all over, and he said, "Well, you're soft and cuddly, and you have long silky ears, and a little fluffy tail, and a dear twitchy little nose. You must be a bunny rabbit." And the little blind bunny was so pleased he danced with joy. Then he said, "I can't thank you enough, but, by the way, what kind of animal are you?" And the snake replied that he didn't know, and the bunny agreed to examine him, and when he was finished, the snake said, "Well, what kind of an animal am I?" So the bunny felt the snake all over, and he replied, "You're hard, you're cold, you're slimy, and you haven't got any balls. You must be a lawyer." So a stingy old lawyer who had been diagnosed with a terminal illness was determined to prove wrong the old saying, "You can't take it with you." After much thought and consideration, the old ambulance chaser finally figured out how to take at least some of his money with him when he died. He instructed his wife to go to the bank and withdraw enough money to fill 2 pillowcases. He then directed her to take the bags of money to the attic and leave them directly above his bed. His plan was when he passed away, he would reach out and grab the bags on his way to heaven. Several weeks after the funeral, the deceased lawyer's wife, up in the attic cleaning, came upon the 2 forgotten pillowcases stuffed with cash. "Oh, that old fool," she exclaimed. "I knew he should have had me put the money in the basement." So a big city lawyer was representing the railroad in a lawsuit filed by an old rancher. The rancher's prize bull was missing from the section through which the railroad passed. The rancher only wanted to be paid the fair value of the bull. The case was scheduled to be tried before the justice of the peace in the back room of the general store. The attorney for the railroad immediately cornered the rancher and tried to get him to settle out of court. The lawyer did his best-selling job, and finally the rancher agreed to take half of what he was asking. After the rancher had signed the release and took the check, the young lawyer couldn't resist gloating a little over his success, telling the rancher, "You know, I hate to tell you this, old man, but I put one over on you in there. I couldn't have won the case. The engineer was asleep and the fireman was in the caboose when the train went through your ranch that morning. I didn't have one witness to put on the stand. I bluffed you." The old rancher replied, "Well, I'll tell you, young feller, I was a little worried about winning that case myself, because that bull came home this morning. So an arrogant, rich man passed away one day. In his will, he entrusted $100,000 in cash to each of his closest advisors, his accountant, his doctor, and his lawyer. In his will, he instructed that each of them was to put all of the money into an envelope and place it into his coffin at his funeral, so he could have his money even after death. On the day of the funeral, each of his advisors came with a large envelope, and each, in turn, placed it in the wealthy man's open casket. At the end of the funeral, when the man was buried, each of the advisors walked away from the cemetery together. The accountant said to the other two, "I must confess, I didn't put all of the money in. I kept $20,000 for myself and only put in $80,000. The doctor responded, "I should be honest too. I kept $30,000 for myself and only put in $70,000. The lawyer looked at the other two with disdain and said, "I'm ashamed of both of you. Our client instructed us to put in $100,000 each into his casket, and I'll have you know I put in a check for the full amount." So an architect vacationing on the Riviera met an old lawyer friend and asked him what he was doing there. The lawyer replied, "Remember that lousy real estate I bought? Well, it caught fire, so here I am with the fire insurance proceeds." "What are you doing here?" The architect replied, "Remember that lousy real estate I had in Mississippi? Well, the river overflowed, and here I am with the flood insurance proceeds." The lawyer looked puzzled. "Gee," he asked, "how did you start the flood?" So a man wanted to be dismissed from jury duty, but none of his excuses worked. So on the day of the trial, he asked to approach the bench. "Your Honor," he said, "I must be excused from this trial because I'm prejudiced against the defendant." "Oh," the judge asked. "Yes," the man replied. "I took one look at the man in the blue suit with those beady eyes and that dishonest face, and I thought, he's a crook. He's 100 guilty. So, Your Honor, I couldn't possibly be on this jury." The judge replied, "Get back in the jury box. You are just the kind of juror we are seeking, a good judge of character." The man protested, "How can you say that?" "Because," the judge said, "that man is the defendant's lawyer." So a big city lawyer went duck hunting in rural North Alberta. He shot and dropped a bird, but it fell into a farmer's field on the other side of a fence. As the lawyer climbed over the fence, an elderly farmer drove up on his tractor and asked him what he was doing. The litigator responded, "I shot a duck and it fell in this field, and now I'm going to retrieve it." The old farmer Peter replied, "This is my property, and you are not coming over here." The indignant lawyer said, "I am one of the best trial lawyers in Canada, and if you don't let me get that duck, I'll sue you and take everything you own." The old farmer smiled and said, "Apparently, you don't know how we settle disputes in Alberta. We settle small disagreements like this with the three-kick rule." The lawyer asked, "What is the three-kick rule?" The farmer replied, "Well, because the dispute occurs on my land, I get to go first. I kick you 3 times, and then you kick me 3 times, and so on back and forth until someone gives up." The lawyer thought about the proposed contest and decided that he could easily take the old codger. He agreed to abide by the local custom. The old farmer slowly climbed down from the tractor and walked up to the attorney. His first kick planted the toe of his heavy steel-toed work boot into the lawyer's groin and dropped him to his knees. His second kick to the midriff sent the lawyer's last meal gushing from his mouth. The lawyer was on all fours when the farmer's third kick to his rear end sent him face first into a fresh cow pie. Summoning every bit of his will and remaining strength, the lawyer very slowly managed to get to his feet. Wiping his face with the arm of his jacket, he said, "Okay, you old fart. Now it's my turn." The old farmer smiled and said, "You can have the duck." So a guy walks into a post office one day to see a middle-aged, balding man standing at the counter methodically placing love stamps on bright pink envelopes with hearts all over them. He then takes out a perfume bottle and starts spraying scent all over the envelopes. His curiosity getting the better of him, he goes up to the balding man and asks him what he is doing. The man says, "I'm sending out 1,000 Valentine cards signed with guess who." "But why?" asks the man. "I'm a divorce lawyer," the man replies. So a woman was sued by a man for defamation of character. He charged that she had called him a pig. He was found guilty and fined. After the trial, she asked the judge, "Does this mean I cannot call Mr. Johnson a pig?" The judge said that was true. "Does this mean I cannot call a pig Mr. Johnson?" asked the woman. The judge replied that she could indeed call a pig Mr. Johnson with no fear of being charged with a crime. The woman turned, looked directly at Mr. Johnson, and said, "Good afternoon, Mr. Johnson." So a defendant in a lawsuit involving large sums of money was saying to his lawyer, "If I lose this case, I'll be ruined." "It's in the judge's hands now," said the lawyer. "Would it help if I sent the judge a box of cigars?" asked the defendant. "Oh no," said the lawyer. "This judge is a stickler for ethical behavior. A stunt like that would prejudice him against you. He might even find you in contempt of the court. In fact, you shouldn't even smile at the judge." "I see. Good to know," said his client. Within the course of time, the judge rendered a decision in favor of the defendant. As the defendant left the courthouse, he said to his lawyer, "Thanks for the tip about the cigars. I'm sure we would have lost the case if you'd sent them," said the lawyer. "But I did send them," said his client. "What, you did?" asked the shocked lawyer. "Yes, that's how we won the case." "I don't understand," said his lawyer. "It's easy. I sent the cheapest cigars that I could find to the judge, but enclosed the plaintiff's business card." So NASA was interviewing professionals to be sent to Mars. Only one could go and they could never return to Earth. The first applicant, an engineer, was asked how much he wanted to be paid for going. $1 million, he answered, "because I want to donate it to MIT. The next applicant, a doctor, was asked the same question. He asked for $2 million. "I want to give $1 million to my family," he explained, "and leave the other $1 million for the advancement of medical research." The last applicant was a lawyer. When asked how much money he wanted, he whispered in the interviewer's ear, $3 million. "Why so much?" asked the interviewer. The lawyer replied, "You convince them I'm the best candidate. I'll give you $1 million, I'll keep $1 million, and we'll send the engineer to Mars." So a man finds himself in need of a good lawyer. He finds one online and goes to his office. After being allowed inside, he sits across from the lawyer. He needs legal help, but he wants to make sure he can afford it first. "Can you tell me how much you charge?" he asks. "Of course," the lawyer replies. "I charge $800 to answer 3 questions." The man was alarmed. "Don't you think that's an awful lot of money to answer 3 questions?" he inquired. Yes, it is, answers the lawyer. What's your third question? So a tourist wanders into a back alley antique shop in San Francisco's Chinatown. Picking through the objects on display, he discovers a detailed, life-sized bronze sculpture of a rat. The sculpture is so interesting and unique that he picks it up and asks the shop owner what it costs. $12 for the rat, sir, says the shop owner, and $1,000 more for the story behind it. You can keep the story, old man, he replies, but I'll take the rat. The transaction complete, the tourist leaves the store with the bronze rat under his arm. As he crosses the street in front of the store, 2 live rats emerge from a sewer drain and fall into step behind him. Nervously looking over his shoulder, he begins to walk faster, but every time he passes another sewer drain, more rats come out and follow him. By the time he's walked 2 blocks, at least 100 rats are at his heels, and people begin to point and shout. He walks even faster, and soon breaks into a trot as multitudes of rats swarm from sewers, basements, vacant lots, and abandoned cars. Rats by the thousands are at his heels, and as he sees the waterfront at the bottom of the hill, he panics and starts to run full tilt. No matter how fast he runs, the rats keep up, squealing hideously. Now not just thousands but millions, so that by the time he comes rushing up to the water's edge, a trail of rats 12 city blocks long is behind him. Making a mighty leap, he jumps up onto a light post, grasping it with one arm while he hurls the bronze rat into San Francisco Bay with the other, as far as he can heave it. Pulling his legs up and clinging to the light post, he watches in amazement as the seething tide of rats surges over the breakwater into the sea, where they drown. Shaken and mumbling, he makes his way back to the antique shop. "Ah, so you've come back for the rest of the story," says the owner. "No," says the tourist. "I was wondering if you have a bronze lawyer." So 2 attorneys boarded a flight out of Seattle. One sat in the window seat, the other sat in the middle seat. Just before takeoff, a physician got on and took the aisle seat next to the 2 attorneys. The physician kicked off his shoes, wiggled his toes, and was settling in when the attorney in the window seat said, "I think I'll get up and get a Coke." "No problem," said the physician. "I'll get it for you." While he was gone, one of the attorneys picked up the physician's shoe and spat in it. When he returned with the Coke, the other attorney said, "That looks good. I think I'll have one too." Again, the physician obligingly went to fetch it, and while he was gone, the other attorney picked up the other shoe and spat in it. The physician returned, and they all sat back and enjoyed the flight. As the plane was landing, the physician slipped his feet into his shoes and knew immediately what had happened. "How long must this go on?" he asked. "This fighting between our professions, this hatred, this animosity, this spitting in shoes and pissing in Cokes." So a lawyer and his Czechoslovakian friend were camping in a backwoods section of Maine. Early one morning, the 2 went out to pick berries for their morning breakfast. As they went around the berry patch, gathering blueberries and raspberries in tremendous quantities, along came 2 huge bears, a male and a female. The lawyer, seeing the 2 bears, immediately dashed for cover. His friend, though, wasn't so lucky, and the male bear reached him and swallowed him whole. The lawyer ran back to his Mercedes, tore into town as fast as he could, and got the local backwoods sheriff. The sheriff grabbed his shotgun and dashed back to the berry patch with the lawyer. Sure enough, the 2 bears were still there. "He's in that one," cried the lawyer, pointing to the male, while visions of lawsuits from his friend's family danced in his head. He just had to save his friend. The sheriff looked at the bears and, without batting an eye, leveled his gun, took careful aim, and shot the female. "What did you do that for?" exclaimed the lawyer. "I said he was in the other." "Exactly," replied the sheriff. "Would you believe a lawyer who told you the check was in the mail?" So an old lady gets caught shoplifting. On court day, the lady and her husband who goes stand before the judge, and she says to her, "Why did you shoplift?" And she says, "I was hungry." The judge says, "What did you take?" She replies, "A can of peaches." The judge thinks on this and comes to a decision. "How many peaches were in the can?" "6, says the old lady. "Then you shall serve 6 days in jail," decrees the judge. "Do you have anything to add?" "Ah, Your Honor." Her husband suddenly raises his hand. "She stole a can of peas too." So an attorney was working late one night in his office when, suddenly, Satan appeared before him. The devil made him an offer. "I will make it so you win every case that you try for the rest of your life. Your clients will worship you, your colleagues will be in awe, and you will make enormous amounts of money. But in return, you must give me your soul, your wife's soul, the souls of your children, your parents, grandparents, and those of all your friends." The lawyer thought about it for a moment, then asked, "But what's the catch?" So a patient who needs a heart transplant suddenly gets a phone call from his surgeon. "You are in luck. We have 2 matching donors. A 20-year-old athlete and an 80-year-old lawyer. Which heart do you want?" The patient answers, "Give me the lawyer's heart." "Are you sure?" asks the surgeon in surprise. "Yea, I'd rather have one that hasn't been used." So one day the wall between heaven and hell collapses. People from both sides went to the collapsed wall to see what happened. Apparently nobody knows what happened, and both sides claim that it's not their fault, hence they don't want to repair it. One guy said, "All right then, we have to let the court decide who is gonna rebuild the wall," and everybody agreed. 2 days later, people from hell were surprised to see that people from heaven had already started to rebuild the wall. They went there and asked them, "Why did you guys start to rebuild the wall?" "We all agreed to let the court decide what happened." People from heaven looked at them furiously and said, "We couldn't find any lawyer." So an old man was critically ill. Feeling that death was near, he called his lawyer. "I want to become a lawyer." "How much is it, or the express degree you told me about?" "It's $50,000, the lawyer said." "But why?" "You'll be dead soon. Why do you want to become a lawyer?" "That's my business." "Get me the course." 4 days later, the old man got his law degree. His lawyer was at his bedside, making sure his bill would be paid. Suddenly, the old man was racked with fits of coughing, and it was clear that this would be the end. Still curious, the lawyer leaned over and said, "Please, before it's too late, tell me why you wanted to get a law degree so badly before you died." In a faint whisper, as he breathed his last, the old man said, "One less lawyer." So a local United Way office realized that the organization had never received a donation from the town's most successful lawyer. The person in charge of contributions called him to persuade him to contribute. "Our research shows that out of a yearly income of at least $500,000, you give not a penny to charity. Wouldn't you like to give back to the community in some way?" The lawyer mulled this over for a moment and replied, "First, did your research also show that my mother is dying after a long illness and has medical bills that are several times her annual income?" Embarrassed, the United Way rep mumbled, No. The lawyer continues, or that my brother, a disabled veteran, is blind and confined to a wheelchair. The stricken United Way rep began to stammer out an apology, but was interrupted again. Or that my sister's husband died in a traffic accident, the lawyer's voice rising in indignation, leaving her penniless with 3 children. The humiliated United Way rep, completely beaten, said simply, "I had no idea." On a roll, the lawyer cut him off once again. "So if I don't give any money to them, why should I give any to you?" So a lawyer was standing in a long line to get tickets for Cats, which was making its long-anticipated return to Broadway. Suddenly, he felt a pair of hands kneading into his back. Startled by this blatant intrusion of personal space, he turned around to find out that it was a complete stranger standing in line behind him doing the kneading. Giving the stranger a stern look, the kneading stopped for a few minutes, but he felt hands working on his back again soon enough. "Excuse me," the lawyer asked, "but why are you touching my back, and what on earth makes you think you have the right to do so without asking me first?" "Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm a chiropractor, you see," the man replied, "and sometimes I just can't keep myself from practicing my skills." "Well, you should really get a hold of yourself. It's not appropriate to be touching the backs of random men without their permission," the lawyer shot back. "In fact, I'm an attorney, and you don't see me screwing just any old guy in front of me, do you?" So one day, there was this lawyer who had just bought a new car, and he was eager to show it off to his colleagues, when all of a sudden, an 18-wheeler came out of nowhere and took off the driver's side door with him standing right there. "Oh no!" he screamed, because he knew that no matter how much a mechanic tried to fix it, it never would be the same. Finally, a policeman came by, and the lawyer ran up to him yelling, "My BMW's door was just ruined by some foolish driver," he exclaimed. "You're a lawyer, aren't you?" asked the policeman. "Yes, I am." "But what does this have to do with my car?" the lawyer asked. "Haha," the policeman replied. "You lawyers are always so materialistic. All you care about are your possessions. I bet you didn't even notice that your left arm is missing, did you?" the cop said. The lawyer looked down at his side and exclaimed, "My Rolex." So 3 friends, a rabbi, a Hindu holy man, and a lawyer, had car trouble in the countryside and asked to spend the night with a farmer. The farmer said, "There might be a problem. You see, I only have room for 2 to sleep, so one of you must sleep in the barn." "No problem," chimed the rabbi. "My people wandered in the desert for 40 years. I'm humble enough to sleep in the barn for an evening in their memory." With that he departed to the barn, and the others bedded down for the night. Moments later a knock was heard at the door. The farmer opened the door. There stood the rabbi from the barn. "What's wrong?" asked the farmer. He replied, "I'm grateful to you, good sir, but I can't sleep in the barn. There is a pig in the barn, and my faith believes that is an unclean animal." His Hindu friend agreed to swap places with him. But a few minutes later the same scene recurred. There was a knock on the door. "What's wrong now?" the farmer asked. The Hindu holy man replied, "I too am grateful for your helping us out, but there is a cow in the barn, and in my country cows are considered sacred. I can't sleep on holy ground." Well, that left only the lawyer to make the change. He grumbled and complained, but went out to the barn. Moments later there was another knock on the farmer's door. Frustrated and tired, the farmer opened the door, and there stood the pig and the cow. So the madam opened the brothel door to see a rather dignified, well-dressed, good-looking man in his late 40s or early 50s. "Can I help you?" she asked. I want to see Natalie, the man replied. Sir, Natalie is one of our most expensive ladies. Perhaps you would prefer someone else, said the madam. No, I must see Natalie, was the man's reply. Just then, Natalie appeared and announced to the man that she charged $1,000 a visit. Without hesitation, the man pulled out 10 $100 bills and gave them to Natalie, and they went upstairs. After an hour, the man calmly left. The next night the same man appeared again, demanding to see Natalie. Natalie explained that no one had ever come back 2 nights in a row too expensive, and there were no discounts. The price was still $1,000. Again the man pulled out the money, gave it to Natalie, and they went upstairs. After an hour, he left. The following night the man was there again. Everyone was astounded that he had come for the 3rd consecutive night, but he paid Natalie and they went upstairs. After their session, Natalie questioned the man. No one has ever used me 3 nights in a row. Where are you from? She asked. The man replied, South Carolina. Really? She said. I have family in South Carolina. I know, the man said. Your father died and I'm your sister's attorney. She asked me to give you your $3,000 inheritance. Hope you enjoy it. So 2 lawyers are in a bank when, suddenly, armed robbers burst in, waving guns and yelling for everyone to freeze. While several of the robbers take the money from the tellers, others line the customers, including the lawyers, up against a wall and proceed to take their wallets, watches, and other valuables. While this is going on, one of the lawyers jams something into the other lawyer's hand. Without looking down, the second lawyer whispers, "What is this?" The first lawyer replies, "It's the $100 I owe you." So in a trial, a southern small-town prosecuting attorney called his first witness, a grandmotherly, elderly woman, to the stand. He approached her and asked, "Mrs. Jones, do you know me?" She responded, "Why, yes, I do know you, Mr. Williams. I've known you since you were a young boy, and frankly, you've been a big disappointment to me. You lie, you cheat on your wife, and you manipulate people and talk about them behind their backs. You think you're a big shot when you haven't the brains to realize you never will amount to anything more than a 2-bit paper pusher." "Yes, I know you." The lawyer was stunned. Not knowing what else to do, he pointed across the room and asked, "Mrs. Jones, do you know the defense attorney?" She again replied, "Why, yes, I do. I've known Mr. Bradley since he was a youngster, too. He's lazy, bigoted, and he has a drinking problem. He can't build a normal relationship with anyone, and his law practice is one of the worst in the entire state. Not to mention he cheated on his wife with 3 different women. One of them was your wife." "Yes, I know him." The defense attorney almost died. The judge asked both counselors to approach the bench and, in a very quiet voice, said, "If either of you idiots asks her if she knows me, I'll send you both to the electric chair." So a defendant was on trial for murder. There was strong evidence indicating guilt, but no body had been found. When giving the closing statement, his high-flying lawyer knew there was a good chance of him being convicted. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I have a surprise for you all," said the lawyer. "Within 1 minute, the person presumed dead in this case will walk into this courtroom." And she turned and pointed at the courtroom door. The jurors, somewhat stunned, all looked on eagerly. A minute passed. Nothing happened. Finally, the lawyer said, "Actually, I made up the previous statement. But you all looked on with anticipation. I therefore put to you that you have a reasonable doubt in this case as to whether anyone was killed and insist that you return a verdict of not guilty." The jury, clearly confused, retired to deliberate. A few minutes later, the jury returned and pronounced a verdict of guilty. "But how?" inquired the lawyer. "You must have had some doubt. I saw all of you stare at the door." "Oh, we did," replied the jury foreman. "But your client didn't." So a lawyer married a woman who had previously divorced 10 husbands. On their wedding night, she told her new husband, "Please be gentle, I'm still a virgin." "What?" said the puzzled groom. "How can that be if you've been married 10 times?" "Well, husband 1 was a sales representative. He kept telling me how great it was going to be. Husband 2 was in software services. He was never really sure how it was supposed to function, but he said he'd look into it and get back to me. Husband 3 was from field services. He said everything checked out diagnostically, but he just couldn't get the system up. Husband 4 was in telemarketing. Even though he knew he had the order, he didn't know when he would be able to deliver. Husband 5 was an engineer. He understood the basic process but wanted 3 years to research, implement, and design a new state-of-the-art method. Husband 6 was from finance and administration. He thought he knew how, but he wasn't sure whether it was his job or not. Husband 7 was in marketing. Although he had a nice product, he was never sure how to position it. Husband 8 was a psychologist. All he ever did was talk about it. Husband 9 was a gynecologist. All he did was look at it. Husband 10 was a stamp collector. All he ever did was God. I miss him. But now that I've married you, I'm really excited." "Good," said the new husband. "But why?" "Oh, you're a lawyer. This time I know I'm gonna get screwed." So a lawyer goes to heaven. St. Peter meets him at the pearly gates. The lawyer is impressed, but asks, "Are you sure it is my time?" "I'm not that old." St. Peter says, "What do you mean?" "You're 86 years old." The lawyer says, "No, I'm not. I'm only 58. "Why do you think I'm 86? St. Peter says, "Well, we just added up all of the hours you've billed to your clients." So a guy calls a law office and says, "I want to talk to my lawyer." The receptionist replies, "I'm sorry, but he died last week." The next day he phones again and asks the same question. The receptionist replies, "I told you yesterday, he died last week." The next day the guy calls again and asks to speak to his lawyer. By this time the receptionist is getting a little annoyed and says, "I keep telling you, your lawyer died last week. Why do you keep calling?" And the guy says, "Because I just love hearing it." So one afternoon, a wealthy lawyer was riding in the back of his limousine when he saw 2 men eating grass by the roadside. He ordered his driver to stop and he got out to investigate. He asked one of the men, "Why are you eating the grass?" "We don't have money for food," the poor man replied. "Oh, come along with me then," instructed the lawyer. The man answered, "But sir, I have a wife and 2 children." "Bring them along," replied the lawyer. The lawyer turned to the other man and said, "Come with us." "But sir, I have a wife and 6 children." The second man answered, "Bring them as well," replied the lawyer as he headed for his limo. They all climbed into the limo. Once underway, one of the poor fellows says, "Sir, you are too kind. Thank you for taking all of us with you." The lawyer replied, "No problem. The grass at my house is almost a foot tall." So a farmer named Rick had a car accident. In court, the trucking company's lawyer was questioning Rick. "Didn't you say, at the moment of the accident, I'm fine?" asked the lawyer. Rick responded, "Well, I'll tell you what happened. I had just loaded my favorite mule, Bessie, into the—" "I did not ask you for any details," the lawyer interrupted. "Just answer the question. Did you not say, at the scene of the accident, I'm fine?" Rick said, "Well, I had just got Bessie into the trailer and I was driving down the road." The lawyer interrupted again and said, "Judge, I'm trying to establish the fact that, at the scene of the accident, this man told the highway patrolman on the scene that he was just fine. Now, several weeks after the accident, he is trying to sue my client. I believe he is a fraud. Please tell him to simply answer the question." By this time, the judge was fairly interested in Rick's answer and said to the lawyer, "I'd like to hear what he has to say about his favorite mule, Bessie." Rick thanked the judge and proceeded. "Well, as I was saying, I had just loaded Bessie, my favorite mule, into the trailer and was driving down the highway when this huge semi-truck and trailer ran the stop sign and smacked my truck right in the side. I was thrown into one ditch and Bessie was thrown into the other. I was hurting real bad and didn't want to move. However, I could hear old Bessie moaning and groaning. I knew she was in terrible shape just by her groans. When the highway patrolman came on the scene, he could hear Bessie moaning and groaning, so he went over to her. After he looked at her and saw her near-fatal condition, he took out his rifle and shot her between the eyes. Then the patrolman came across the road, rifle still in hand, looked at me and said, 'How are you feeling?' Now, what the heck would you say?" So a man and his girlfriend died in a car accident and meets Peter at the pearly gates. Peter says, "Welcome to heaven. Do you have any questions?" To which the man replies, "Yes, my girlfriend and I never had a chance to get married while we were alive. Can we get married in heaven?" Peter says, "That's a good question. I will be back when I have the answer." Left at the gates, the couple begins to talk about love and how long eternity is. 6 weeks later, Peter returns and says, "Okay, I've found your answer. Yes, you can get married in heaven. So come right in and enjoy eternity together." The couple responds by saying, "We have another question. Eternity is a very long time, and we are not sure if our relationship will last. If things don't work out, can we get a divorce in heaven?" To which Peter replies, "Jesus Christ. It took me 6 weeks to find a priest up here. Do you have any idea how long it'll take me to find a lawyer?" So a lawyer was interviewing a doctor about the death of a patient. "When you examined the patient, did you check his pulse?" asked the lawyer. "I didn't," said the doctor. "And did you listen for a heartbeat?" said the lawyer. "No, I did not," the doctor said. So in other words, the lawyer said, when you signed the death certificate, you had not taken adequate steps to confirm he was dead. "Well, let me put it this way," said the doctor at that point. "The man's brain was in a jar on my desk. But for all I know, I guess he could have been out practicing law somewhere." So 2 lawyers went into a diner and decided to order drinks. They felt hungry after a long day, so they produced sandwiches from their briefcases and started to eat them. The owner frustratedly marched over and told them, "Listen, you're not allowed to eat your own sandwiches in here." The lawyers looked at each other, shrugged their shoulders, and then exchanged sandwiches. So a truck driver would amuse himself by running over lawyers. Whenever he saw a lawyer walking down the side of the road, he would swerve to hit him, enjoy the load, satisfying bump, and then swerve back onto the road. One day, as the truck driver was driving along, he saw a priest hitchhiking. He thought he would do a good turn and pulled the truck over. He asked the priest, "Where are you going, Father?" "I'm going to the church 5 miles down the road," replied the priest. "No problem, Father. I'll give you a lift. Climb in the truck." The happy priest climbed into the passenger seat, and the truck driver continued down the road. Suddenly, the truck driver saw a lawyer walking down the road, and instinctively he swerved to hit him. But then he remembered there was a priest in the truck with him, so at the last minute he swerved back away, narrowly missing the lawyer. However, even though he was certain he missed the lawyer, he still heard a loud bump. Not understanding where the noise came from, he glanced in his mirrors, and when he didn't see anything, he turned to the priest and said, "I'm sorry, Father. I almost hit that lawyer." "That's okay," replied the priest. "I got him with the door." So a doctor and a lawyer were speaking at a cocktail party. The conversation was constantly being interrupted by people asking the doctor about their specific medical conditions and seeking free health care advice. This went on for about an hour until the doctor was completely exasperated. The doctor asked the lawyer, "How do you handle people asking for legal advice when you're not in the office?" "I give it to them," said the lawyer, "and then I send them a bill for it." Surprised by the response, the doctor said, "Interesting, maybe I'll give that a shot." The doctor felt a bit guilty about doing this but prepared his bills to go out the next day. When he opened his mailbox to send them out, he found a bill from the lawyer. So an elderly spinster called the lawyer's office and told the receptionist she wanted to see the lawyer about having a will prepared. The receptionist suggested they set up an appointment for a convenient time for the spinster to come into the office. The woman replied, "You must understand, I've lived alone all my life, I rarely see anyone, and I don't like to go out. Would it be possible for the lawyer to come to my house?" The receptionist checked with the attorney, who agreed, and he went to the spinster's home for the meeting to discuss her estate and the will. The lawyer's first question was, "Would you please tell me what you have in assets and how you'd like them to be distributed under your will?" She replied, "Besides the furniture and accessories you see here, I have $400,000 in my savings account at the bank." "Tell me," the lawyer asked, "how would you like the $400,000 to be distributed?" The spinster said, "Well, as I've told you, I've lived a reclusive life. People have hardly ever noticed me, so I'd like them to notice when I pass on. I'd like to provide $350,000 for my funeral." The lawyer remarked, "Well, for $350,000 you will be able to have a funeral that will certainly be noticed and will leave a lasting impression on anyone who may not have taken much note of you. But tell me," he continued, "what would you like to do with the remaining $50,000? The spinster replied, "As you know, I've never married. I've lived alone almost my entire life, and in fact I've never slept with a man. Before I die, I'd like you to use the $50,000 to arrange for a man to sleep with me." "This is a very unusual request," the lawyer said, adding, "but I'll see what I can do to arrange it and get back to you." That evening, the lawyer was at home telling his wife about the eccentric spinster and her weird request. After thinking about how much she could do around the house with $50,000, and with a bit of coaxing, she got her husband to agree to provide the service himself. She said, "I'll drive you over tomorrow morning and wait in the car until you're finished." The next morning, she drove him to the spinster's house and waited while he went into the house. She waited for over an hour, but her husband didn't come out. So she blew the car horn. Shortly, the upstairs bedroom window opened. The lawyer stuck his head out and yelled, "Pick me up tomorrow. She's going to let the county bury her." So 3 lawyers and 3 engineers are traveling by train to a conference. At the station, the 3 lawyers each buy tickets and watch as the 3 engineers buy only a single ticket. How are 3 people going to travel on only 1 ticket? Asked one of the 3 lawyers. Watch and you'll see, answers one of the engineers. They all board the train. The lawyers take their respective seats, but all 3 engineers cram into a restroom and close the door behind them. Shortly after the train departed, the conductor comes around collecting tickets. He knocks on the restroom door and says, "Ticket, please." The door opens just a crack and a single arm emerges with a ticket in hand. The conductor takes it and moves on. The lawyers saw this and agreed it was quite a clever idea. So after the conference, the lawyers decide to copy the engineers on the return trip and save some money. When they get to the station, they buy a single ticket for the return trip. To their astonishment, the engineers don't buy a ticket at all. "How are you going to travel without a ticket?" asks one perplexed lawyer. "Watch and you'll see," says one of the engineers. When they board the train, the 3 lawyers cram into a restroom and the 3 engineers cram into another one nearby. The train departs. Shortly afterward, one of the engineers leaves his restroom and walks over to the restroom where the lawyers are hiding. He knocks on the door and says, "Ticket, please." So there was a loser who couldn't get a date. He went to a bar and asked this one guy how to get a date. The guy said, "It's simple. I just say, I'm a lawyer." So the guy went up to a pretty woman and asked her out. After she said no, he told her that it was probably a good thing because he had a case early in the morning. She said, "Oh, you're a lawyer." He said, "Why, yes I am." So they went to his place, and when they were in bed, making love, he started to laugh to himself. When she asked what was so funny, he answered, "Well, I've only been a lawyer for 15 minutes, and I'm already screwing someone." A secretary, a paralegal, and a partner in a city law firm are walking through a park on their way to lunch when they find an antique oil lamp. They rub it and a genie comes out in a puff of smoke. The genie says, "I usually only grant 3 wishes, so I'll give each of you just one." "Me first. Me first," says the secretary. "I want to be in the Bahamas, driving a speedboat, without a care in the world." Poof, she's gone. "Me next. Me next," says the paralegal. "I want to be in Hawaii, relaxing on the beach with my personal masseuse, an endless supply of pina coladas, and the love of my life." Poof, he's gone. "You're next," the genie says to the partner. The partner says, "I want those 2 back in the office after lunch." The Godfather, accompanied by his attorney, walks into a room to meet with his accountant. The Godfather asks the accountant, "Where's are the $3 million you embezzled from me?" The accountant doesn't answer. The Godfather asks again, "Where's the $3 million you embezzled from me?" The attorney interrupts, "Sir, the man is a deaf mute and cannot understand you, but I can interpret for you." The Godfather says, "Well, ask him where the hell my money is." The attorney, using sign language, asks the accountant where the $3 million is. The accountant signs back, "I don't know what you're talking about." The attorney interprets to the Godfather, "He doesn't know what you're talking about." The Godfather pulls out a pistol, puts it to the temple of the accountant, cocks the hammer and says, "Ask him again where the hell my money is." The attorney signs to the accountant, "He wants to know where it is." The accountant signs back, "Okay. Okay. The money's hidden in a suitcase behind the shed in my backyard." The godfather says, "Well, what did he say?" The attorney interprets to the godfather. He says that you don't have the guts to pull the trigger. So 5 surgeons were taking a coffee break and discussing their work. The first said, "I think accountants are the easiest to operate on. You open them up and everything inside is numbered." The second said, "I think librarians are the easiest to operate on. You open them up and everything inside is in alphabetical order." The third said, "I like to operate on electricians. You open them up and everything inside is color-coded." The fourth surgeon said, "I like engineers. They always understand when you have a few parts left over at the end." The fifth one said, "I like to operate on lawyers. They're heartless, spineless, gutless, and their heads and their butts are interchangeable."